Hey crew, it's Pitt and I am back with some more philosophy. Today we are diving back into the work of Georg Hegel. This is The Science of Logic. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but people find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. I'm going to make a note here. This is an extremely long section. It is 43 pages, which is probably going to put it on the plus side of 3 hours, close to 4, which means that I may not be able to get through this entire thing in one setting. If you were unaware because you were just here for the philosophy, this is in part vocal therapy for me. I am not, or have not, been able to speak as long as I have here recently for a long time, and it is because of what we do here in part, right? I do magic. Magic has healed me, but I still have to do the physical therapy part. And so this is in part my vocal therapy. So when my voice gets tired, I may have to call it. We'll see how it goes. It'll probably be around 20 pages in, so we may only get about halfway through this. I've already done an hour and a half of talking this morning, so with all of that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of the science of logic with Chapter 2, Existence. Existence is determinate being. Its determinateness is existent determinateness, quality. Through its quality, something is opposed to another. It is alterable and finite, negatively determined not only towards another but absolutely within it. This negation in it, in contrast at first with the finite something, is the infinite. The abstract opposition in which these determinations appear resolves itself into oppositionless infinity, into being for itself. This treatment of existence is therefore in 3 divisions: existence as such, something and other, finitude, and qualitative infinity. A. Existence as such. In existence, A, as such, its determinateness is first, B, to be distinguished as quality. The latter, however, is to be taken in both the 2 determinations of existence as reality and negation. In these determinacies, however, existence is equally reflected into itself, and, as so reflected, it is posited as C, something, and existent. A. Existence in general. Existence proceeds from becoming. It is the simple oneness of being and nothing. On account of this simplicity, it has the form of an immediate. Its mediation, the becoming, lies behind it. It has sublated itself, and existence, therefore, as a first from which the forward move is made. It is, at first, in the one-sided determination of being. The other determination, which contains nothing, will likewise come up in it, in contrast to the first. It is not mere being, but existence, or Dasein in German, according to its German etymology. It is being, Sein, in a certain place, Sein. But the representation of space does not belong here. As it follows upon becoming, existence is in general being with a non-being, so that this non-being is taken up into simple unity with being. Non-being, thus taken up into being, with the result that the concrete whole is in the form of being, of immediacy, constitutes determinateness as such. So we've already talked about how In order for something to exist in the ideal, it cannot be determined, right? We use the lighter as an example. The concept of a lighter is not limited to what you can see right here. This is, 3 inches long, half an inch wide, quarter inch in diameter. It is green, right? It lights a fire. The only part of that which is required for the lighter is that it lights a fire. It doesn't have to be this dimension. It doesn't have to be this color. But once it is this dimension and this color, it is determined that this is this particular lighter, as opposed to the concept of the lighter. The concept of the lighter is idealism. The physical determinateness is realism. In order to exist, something has to be determined. That is what is being said here, right? You have to have the ability to clarify exactly what something is. Maybe not in fullness, but to a degree, right? I didn't mention the fact that there's butane in this lighter, although there is. You don't have to have the full scope, but you have to be able to describe, at least in part, the mutable characteristics. And so once something is existent, then it is, by necessity, determined. That is what is being said. The whole is likewise in the form or determinateness of being, since in becoming, being has likewise shown itself to be only a moment, something sublated, negatively determined. It is such, however, for us, in our reflection, not yet as posited in it. What is posited, however, is the determinateness as such of existence, as is also expressed by the da, or there, of the Dasein. The two are always to be clearly distinguished. Only that which is posited in a concept belongs, in the course of the elaboration of the latter, to its content. Any determinateness not yet posited in the concept itself belongs instead to our reflection, whether this reflection is directed to the nature of the concept itself or is a matter of external comparison. To remark on the determinateness of this last kind can only be for the clarification or anticipation of the whole that will transpire in the course of the development itself. That the whole unity of being and nothing is on the one-sided determinateness of being is an external reflection, but in negation, in something and other, and so forth, it will become posited. It was necessary here to call attention to the distinction just given, but to comment on all that reflection can allow itself, to give an account of it, would lead to a long-winded anticipation of what must transpire in the fact itself. Although such reflections may serve to facilitate a general overview, and thus facilitate understanding, they also bring the disadvantage of being seen as unjustified assertions, unjustified grounds and foundations of what is to follow. They should be taken for no more than what they are supposed to be, and should be distinguished from what constitutes a moment in the advance of the fact itself. Existence corresponds to being in the preceding sphere, but being is the indeterminate. There are no determinations that therefore transpire in it, but existence is the determinate being, something concrete. Consequently, several determinations, several distinct relations of its moments immediately emerge in it. B. Quality. On account of the immediacy with which being and nothing are one in existence, neither oversteps the other, to the extent that existence is existent. So that extent is non-being, it is determined. Being is not the universal determinateness, nor the particular. Determinateness has yet to detach itself from being, nor will it ever detach itself from it. Since the now underlying truth is the unity of non-being with being, all further determinations will transpire on this basis. But the connection which determinateness now has with being is one of the immediate unity of the two, so that, as yet, no differentiation between the two is posited. Determinateness, thus, isolated by itself as existent determinateness, is quality, something totally simple, immediate. Determinateness, in general, is the more universal, which, further determined, can be something quantitative as well. On account of this simplicity, there is nothing further to say about quality as such. Existence, however, in which nothing and being are equally contained, is itself the measure of the one-sidedness of quality as an only immediate or existent determinateness. Quality is equally to be posited in the determination of nothing, and the result is that the immediate or existent determinateness is posited as distinct, reflected, and the nothing, as thus the determinate element of determinateness will equally be something reflected, a negation. Quality, in the distinct value of existent, is reality. When affected by negating, it is negation in general. Still a quality, but one that counts as a lack and is further determined by as limit, restriction. Both are an existence, but in reality, as quality with the accent on being an existent, that it is determinateness, and hence also negation is concealed. Reality only has, therefore, the value of something positive from which negating, restricting, lack are excluded. Negation, for its part, taken as mere lack, would be what nothing is, but it is an existence, a quality, only determined with a non-being. All right, so quality here is going to be both the overall shape and the individual characteristics, right? So this is green. That is one of its characteristics or qualities. It is 3 inches long, right, roughly, right? That is another one of its qualities. It is in good functional shape. That also is a quality. It does its job. If, when I did this, there was no fire, it would be poor quality, but it is still a quality. So, the descriptions by which you give something that has been determined, or can be determined, is the qualities with which it is. What would be the correct word there? The qualities which it possesses. Remark. Reality may seem to be an ambiguous word, since it is used in different, even opposite, determinations. In philosophical usage, for instance, one speaks of mere empirical reality as of a worthless being. But when it is said of thoughts, concepts, theories, that they have no reality, this means that there is no actuality to them. Of the idea of a Platonic republic, for instance, it is said that it might well be true in itself or in its concept. Here, the idea is not denied its value and is even allowed room alongside reality. We have read through the entirety of Plato's Republic. It is part of the Ancient Lore playlist. It has its own playlist, but you'll have to look that one up. We did go through the Platonic Republic, which is the idealized form of a republic, and a good description of why a republic is much better than a democracy in every single instance. However, as against the so-called mere ideas, the mere concepts, the real alone counts as true. The sense in which external existence is made the criterion of the truth of a content is, for its part, just as one-sided as when the idea, the essence, or even inner feeling, is represented as indifferent to the external existence and is even held to be all the more estimable by the more remote it is from reality. In connection with the term reality, mention must be made of the former metaphysical concept of God that was once made the foundation of the so-called ontological proof of God's existence. That is footnote 43. Let's see if that's actually one. The most perfect being is defined as one in which all possible co-realities inhere in the absolutely highest degree. Christian Wolff. God was defined as the sum total of all realities, and of this sum total it was said that it contained no contradiction within, that none of the realities canceled each other. For a reality is to be taken only as a perfection, as something affirmative, that contains no negation. Consequently, as it was said, the realities are not in opposition and do not contradict one another. On this concept of reality, the assumption is that the latter still remains, after all, a negation that has been thought away. However, to do this is to remove all determinateness from reality. Reality is quality, existence. It therefore contains the moment of the negative and is the determinate being that it is only through it. Taken in the so-called immanent sense, or as infinite in the ordinary meaning of the word, as we are said we should, reality is expanded into indeterminateness and loses its meaning. God's goodness is supposed to be such not in the ordinary sense, but eminently. It is not different from justice, but is rather tempered by it, an expression of mediation of Leibnizian origin. That footnote is just a reference. Just as contrariwise justice is tempered by goodness, and so neither is goodness any longer, nor justice justice. Power should be tempered by wisdom, but it is then no longer power as such, for it is subject to wisdom. Wisdom should be expanded into power, but then it vanishes as end and measure setting wisdom. The true concept of the infinite and of its absolute unity that will later emerge is not to be understood as a tempering, a mutual restricting or blending, a superficial reality taken in the sense of a determinate quality, as in the said definition of God, is made to transgress its determinateness. It ceases to be reality. It becomes abstract being. God, as the pure reality in all realities, or as the sum total of all realities, is the same empty absolute, void of determination and content, in which all is one. If, on the contrary, reality is taken in its determinateness, then, since it essentially contains the moment of the negative, the sum total of all realities becomes just as much a sum total of all negations, the sum total of all contradictions, a sort of first, absolute power, in which everything determinate is absorbed. However, since reality only exists in so far as it still has over against it something which has not sublated, by being thought expanded in this way into an accomplished power void of restrictions, it becomes the absolute nothing. The said reality in everything real, the being in all existence that should express the concept of God, is nothing else than abstract being, the same as nothing. That determinateness is negation, posited as affirmative in Spinoza's proposition, omnis determinatio est negatio. 46 is, all of these are just, okay. A proposition of infinite importance. Only negation as such is formless abstraction. However, speculative philosophy must not be accused of taking negation as or nothing as an ultimate. Negation is as little an ultimate for it as reality is for the truth. The unity of Spinoza's substance, or that there is only one substance, is the necessary consequence of this proposition, that determinateness is negation. Spinoza had of necessity to posit thought and being, or extension, the two determinations, namely, which he had before him, as one in this unity. For, as determinate realities, the two are negations, whose infinity is their unity. According to Spinoza's definition, about which more later on, the infinity of something is its affirmation. He therefore conceived them as attributes, that is, such as do not have a particular subsistence, a being in and for itself, but only are as sublated as moments, or rather, since substance is the total void of internal determinateness, they are not even moments. The attributes, like the modes, are distinctions made by an external understanding. Also, the substantiality of individuals cannot hold its own before that substance. The individual refers to itself by setting limits to every other, but these limits are therefore also the limits of itself. They are references to the other. The individual's existence is not in the individual. True, the individual is more than just restrictions on all sides. But this more belongs to another sphere, that of the concept, in the metaphysics of being. The individual is an absolutely determinate something, and against this something, against this finite that would be in and for itself as such, determinateness asserts itself essentially as negation, dragging it into the same negative movement of the understanding that makes everything vanish into the abstract unity of substance. Negation stands immediately over against reality. Further on, in the sphere proper to reflected determinations, it will be opposed to the positive, which is reality reflecting upon negation, the reality in which the negative, still hiding in reality as such, shines forth. Quality, specifically, is a property only when, in an external connection, it manifests itself as an immanent determination. By properties of verbs, for instance, we understand determinations which are not just proper to a something, but are such that, in virtue of them, the something holds its own while referring to others, and will not give in to the alien influences posited in it by them. On the contrary, it imposes its own determinations in the other, though it does not keep it at a distance. On the other hand, more stable determinacies, such as figure or shape, are not called properties or even qualities, for they are thought of as alterable, and therefore not identical with being. Qualierung or inqualierung, an expression of Jacob Boehm's profound but also profoundly turbid philosophy, signifies the movement within a quality, sourness, bitterness, fieriness, etc., inasmuch as it is in negative nature, in its qual or torment. The quality posits itself, securing itself from another. It signifies in general the internal unrest of quality by which it produces and preserves itself only in conflict. Okay. C. Something. In existence, its determinateness has been distinguished as quality. In this quality, as something existing, the distinction exists. The distinction of reality and negation. Now, though these distinctions are present in existence, they are just as much null and sublated. Reality itself contains negation. It is existence, not indeterminate or abstract being. Negation is, for its part, equally existence, not the supposed abstract nothing, but posited here as it is in itself as existent, as belonging to existence. Thus, quality is, in general, unseparated from existence, and the latter is only determinate, qualitative being. This sublating of the distinction is more than the mere retraction and external re-omission of it, or a simple return to the simple beginning, to existence as such. The distinction cannot be left out, for it is. Therefore, what de facto is at hand is this: existence in general, distinction in it, and the sublation of this distinction, the existence, not void of distinctions as at the beginning, but as again self-equal through the sublation of the distinction, the simplicity of existence mediated through this sublation. This state of sublation of the distinction is existence's own determinateness. Existence is thus being in itself. It is existent, something. Something is the first negation of negation, as simple self-existent reference, or as simple existent self-reference. Existence, life, thought, and so forth essentially take on the determination of an existent being, a living thing, a thinking mind, I, and so forth. This determination is of the highest importance if we do not wish to halt at existence, life, thought, and so forth as generalities, also not at godhood instead of God. In common representation, something rightly carries the connotation of a real thing, yet it is still very superficial determination, just as reality and negation, existence and its determinateness, though no longer the empty being and nothing, still are quite abstract determinations. For this reason, they are the most common expressions, and a reflection that is still philosophically unschooled uses them the most. It casts its distinctions in them, fancying that in them it has something ready, well, and firmly determined. As something, the negative of the negative, is only the beginning of the subject. In its in itselfness is still quite indeterminate. It determines itself further on, at first as existent for itself, and so on, until it finally obtains in the concept the intensity of the subject. At the base of all these determinations there lies the negative unity with itself. In all this, however, care must be taken to distinguish the first negation, negation as negation in general, from the second negation, the negation of negation, which is concrete, absolute negativity, just as the first is, on the contrary, only abstract negativity. Something is an existent, as the negation of negation. For such a negation is the restoration of the simple reference to itself. But the something is thereby equally the mediation of itself with itself, present in the simplicity of something, and then with greater determinateness in being for itself, in the subject, and so forth. This mediation of itself with itself is also already present in becoming, but only as totally abstract mediation. Mediation with itself is posited in the something in so far as the latter is determined as a simple identity. Attention can be drawn to the presence of mediation in general, as against the principle of the alleged bare immediacy of a knowledge from which mediation should be excluded. But there is no further need to draw particular attention to the moment of mediation, since it is to be found everywhere and on all sides in every concept. This mediation with itself, which something is in itself, when taken only as the negation of negation, has no concrete determinations for its sides. Thus, it collapses into the simple unity which is being. Something is, and is, therefore, also an existent. Further, it is in itself also becoming, but a becoming that no longer has only beginning and nothing for its moments. One of these moments, being, is now existence, and further, an existent. The other moment is equally an existent, but determined as the negative of something, an other. As becoming something is a transition, the moments of which are themselves something, and for that reason it is an alteration, a becoming that has already become concrete. At first, however, something alters only in its concept. It is not yet posited in this way, as mediated and mediating, but at first only as maintaining itself simply in its reference to itself, and its negative is posited as equally as qualitative, as only another in general. Alright, so we're going to go back to the lighter, right? Once you have determined, I am going to create a lighter, right? You have the concept of a lighter, but you do not have the determinant of what it will be. Once you have started to create the lighter, and you have decided it is going to be 3 inches long, then it becomes a something. Once you have decided that it is going to be a green lighter, it becomes a something else. Separate from the concept of lighter, and separate from the concept of non-existence, it is becoming the being that it is determined to be. And it is something in the process of becoming what it shall be. Hopefully that was clear enough. B. Finitude. A. Something and other. But first they are indifferent to one another. And other is also an immediate existent. And the negation part, right? Once you have decided I am going to create a lighter that is 3 inches long, you are negating all the other lighters, all the other possibilities of the shape, form, and function. Once you have decided it's going to be a butane lighter, you are negating propane lighters. Once you have decided it is going to be a green lighter, it has negated the blue lighter and separated itself from the idea of a lighter. A. Something and other. At first they are indifferent to one another. Another is also an immediate existent. A. Something. The negation thus falls outside both. Something is in itself in contrast to its being for other. But the determinateness belongs also to its in itself. And B. The determination of this in itself, in turn, passes over into constitution. And this latter, as identical with determination, constitutes the immanent and at the same time negated being for another, the limit of something which, C, is the immanent determination of the something itself, and the something, thus, is the finite. So, for every quality that you assign to the lighter, it is a step, right? It is a something in contrast with itself, right? With its being for other. Now, the being for other is the possibility that this is a blue lighter or a propane lighter, right? It negates that. There is no longer that possibility. Instead, you have determined. And this determination passes over into what constitutes this particular lighter, right? This particular lighter is constituted by the qualities of 3 inches long, green, butane, right? That is the constitution of this lighter, defined by its qualities, and thus separated from the possibility of other qualities. In the first division, where existence in general was considered, this existence had, as at first taken up the determination of an existent. The moment of its development, quality, and something are therefore the equally affirmative determination. We have affirmatively determined that this will be a green lighter. The present division, on the contrary, develops the negative determination which is present in existence and was there from the start only as negation in general. It was then the first negation, but has now been determined to the point of the being in itself of the something, the point of the negation of negation. A. Something and another. 1. Something and other are, first, both existence or something. Secondly, each is equally another. It is indifferent which is named first, and just for this reason it is named something. In Latin, when they occur in a preposition, both are aliud, or the one, the other. Alius, alium. In the case of an alternating relation, the analogous expression is alter, alterum. If, of the two beings, we call the one A and the other B, the B is the one which is first determined as other. So if there was a green lighter, A would be the green lighter, and if there was a blue lighter, B would be the blue lighter. And we have decided that A is the qualities of one lighter and B is the qualities of the other lighter. Both are other in the same way. So the blue lighter would be the other for the green lighter, and the green lighter is the other for the blue lighter. This serves to fix the distinction and the something which is to be taken in the affirmative sense. But this also expresses the fact that the distinction and the privileging of one something is a subjective designation that falls outside the something itself. The whole determinateness falls on the side of this external pointing. Also, the expression this contains no distinctions. Each and every something is just as good a this as any other. By this, we mean to express something completely determinate, overlooking the fact that language, as a work of the understanding, only expresses the universal, albeit naming it as a single object. But an individual name is something meaningless in the sense that it does not express a universal. It appears as something merely posited and arbitrary for the same reason that proper names can also be arbitrarily picked, arbitrarily given, as well as arbitrarily altered. Otherness, thus, appears as a determination alien to the existence thus pointed at, or the other existence as outside this one existence, partly because the one existence is determined as other only by being compared by a third, and partly because it is so determined only on account of the other which is outside it, but is not another for itself. At the same time, as has been remarked, even for ordinary thinking, every existence equally determines itself as another existence, so that there is no existence that remains determined simply as an existence, none of which is not outside an existence, and therefore is not itself another. Both are determined as something as well as other. Thus they are the same, and there is as yet no distinction present in them. But this sameness of determinations, too, falls only with external reflection in the comparison of the two. But the other, as posited at first, though another with reference to something, is other also for itself apart from the something. Third, the other is therefore to be taken in isolation with reference to itself, has to be taken abstractly as the other. The to Ethipov of Plato, who opposes it to the one as a moment of totality, and in this way ascribes to the other a nature of its own. Thus, the other, taken solely as such, is not the other of something, but is the other within, that is, the other of itself. Such an other, which is the other by its determination, is physical nature. Nature is the other of spirit. This, its determination, is at first a mere relativity, expressing not a quality of nature itself, but only a reference external to it. But since spirit is the true something, and hence nature is what it is, within only in the contrast to spirit, taken for itself, the quality of nature is just this: to be the other within, that which exists outside itself, in the determinations of space, time, matter. The other which is for itself is the other within it, hence the other of itself, and so the other of the other. Therefore, an absolutely unequal in itself, that which negates itself, alters itself. But it equally remains identical with itself, for that into which it alters into the other. And this other has no additional determination, but that which alters itself is not determined in any other way than in this, to be another. In going over to this other, it only unites with itself. It is thus posited as reflected into itself with sublation of the otherness, a self-identical something, from which the otherness, which is at the same time a moment of it, is therefore distinct, itself not appertaining to it as something. So, we have a lighter, right? But when this lighter runs out of fuel, what is it? It is something other than a lighter. It has the same shape. It has the same characteristics, the same qualities, save one. There is one difference between a full lighter and an empty lighter: the butane contained within it, in a butane lighter. And so, when you light the flame, you consume a small amount of the butane, and therefore it becomes another already. It is a lighter with a different volume of butane in it. But when the butane is gone, it has become a different other. It is no longer a lighter. It is the thing which formerly was a lighter. It still contains all of the qualities except the one. But that one quality being changed what it is. It is no longer a lighter. Now it's trash. 2. The something preserves itself in its non-being. It is essentially one with it, and essentially not one with it. It therefore stands in reference to an otherness, without being just this otherness. The otherness is at once contained in it, and yet separated from it. It is being for other. Existence, as such, is an immediate, bare of references, or it is in the determination of being. However, as including not being within itself, existence is determinate being, being negated within itself, and then, in the first instance, another. But, since in being negated it preserves itself at the same time, it is only being for other. The lighter still thinks that it's a lighter, even if it doesn't serve a purpose. It preserves itself in its non-being and is being. Not, however, being in general, but being with reference to itself in contrast to its reference to the other, as self-equality in contrast to its inequality. Such a being is being in itself. Being for other and being in itself constitute two moments of something. Now, This is, the lighter doesn't know that it serves a function, right? It is being in itself. I am a lighter. To me, this is a lighter up until the point it cannot do this, and then it is trash. But to the lighter, it is still the same. Being for other and being in itself constitute the two moments of something. There are here two pairs of determinations, something and other. 2. Being for other and being in itself. The former contain the non-connectedness of their determinateness. Something and other fall apart, but their truth is their connection. Being for other and being in itself are therefore the same determinations posited as moments of one and the same unity, as determinations which are connections, and which, in their unity, remain in the unity of existence. Each, thus, itself contains within it, at the same time, also the moment diverse from it. Being and nothing in their unity, which is existence, are no longer being and nothing. These, they are, only outside their unity. So, in their restless unity, in becoming, they are coming to be and ceasing to be, right? As you are coming to be the lighter, you are ceasing to be a lighter. In the something, being is being in itself. Now, as self-reference, self-equality, being is no longer immediately, but is self-reference only as the non-being of others, otherness, as existence reflected into itself. The same goes for non-being. At the moment of something in this unity of being and non-being, it is not non-existence in general, but is the other, and more determinately, according as being is at the same time distinguished from it. It is reference to its non-existence, being for other. Hence, being in itself is, first, negative reference to non-existence. It has otherness outside it and is opposed to it. Insofar as something is in itself, it is withdrawn from being other and being for other. But, second, it has non-being also right in it, for it is itself the non-being of being for other. It already contains the potential to be trash. But being for other is, first, the negation of the simple reference of being to itself, which, in the first place, is supposed to be existence and something. Insofar as something is in another or for another, it lacks a being of its own. But, second, it is not non-existence as pure nothing. It is non-existence that points to being in itself, as its being reflected into itself, just as conversely the being in itself points to being for other. 3. Both moments are determinations of one and the same, namely, of something. Something is in itself insofar as it has returned from the being for other back to itself. But something has also a determination or circumstance, whether in itself, here the accent is on the in, or in it. Insofar as this circumstance is in it externally, it is a being for other. This leads to a further determination. Being in itself and being for other are different at first, but that something also has in it what it is for itself, what it is in itself, and conversely is in itself also what it is as being for other. This is the identity of being in itself and being for other, in accordance with the determination that the something is itself one and the same something of both moments, and these are in it, therefore undivided. The identity already occurs formally in the sphere of existence, but more explicitly in the treatment of essence, and later of the relations of interiority and externality, and in the most determinate form in the treatment of the idea as the unity of concept and actuality. Opinion has it that with the in itself, something lofty is being said, as with the inner. But what something is only in itself is also only in it. In itself is a merely abstract and hence itself external determination. The expressions, there is nothing in it, or there is something in it, imply, though somewhat obscurely, that what is in a thing also pertains to its in itselfness, its inner, true worth. It may be observed that here we have the meaning of the thing in itself. It is a very simple abstraction, though it was for a while very important determination, something sophisticated as it were, just as the proposition that we know nothing of what things are in themselves was a much valued piece of wisdom. Things are called in themselves insofar as abstraction is made from all being for other, which really means insofar as they are thought without all determination as nothing. In this sense, of course, it is impossible to know what the thing in itself is, for the question what calls for determinations to be produced. But since the things of which the determinations are called for are at the same time presumed to be things in themselves, which means precisely without determination, the impossibility of an answer is thoughtlessly implanted in the question, or else a senseless answer is given. The thing in itself is the same as that absolute of which nothing is known except that in it all is one. What there is in these things in themselves is therefore very well known. They are as such nothing but abstract, empty abstractions void of truth. What, however, the thing in itself in truth is, what there basically is in it, of this logic is the exposition. But in this logic, something better is understood by the in itself than an abstraction, namely, what something is in its concept, but this concept is in itself concrete, as concept, in principle conceptually graspable, and as determined and as the connected whole of its determinations inherently cognizable. Being in itself has at first the being for other as a moment standing over against it, but positiveness also comes to be positioned over against it, and although in this expression being for other is also included, the expression still contains the determination of the bending back which has already occurred, of that which is not in itself into that wherein it is positive, and this is its being in itself. Being in itself is normally to be taken as an abstract way of expressing the concept. Positing, strictly speaking, first occurs in the sphere of essence, of objective reflection. The ground posits that which is grounded through it. More strongly, the cause produces an effect. An existence whose subsistence is immediately negated, and which carries the meaning that it has substance, its being in another. In the sphere of being, existence only emerges out of becoming. Or again, with the something, another is posited, with the finite, an infinite, but the finite does not bring forth the infinite, does not posit it. In the sphere of being, the self-determining of the concept is at first only in itself or implicit, and for that reason it is called a transition or passing over, and the reflecting determinations of being, such as something and other, or finite and infinite, although they essentially point to one another, or are as being for other, also stand on their own qualitatively. The other exists. The finite, like the infinite, is equally to be regarded as an immediate existent that stands firm on its own. The meaning of each appears complete, even without its other. The positive and the negative, on the contrary, cause and effect, however much they are taken in isolation, have at the same time no meaning each without the other. Their reflective shining in each other, the shine in each of its other, is present right in them. In the different cycles of determination, and especially in the progress of the exposition, or more precisely, in the progress of the concept in the exposition of itself, it is of capital concern always to clearly distinguish what is in itself or implicitly, and what is posited. How determinations are in the concept and how they are posited, or as existing for each other. This is a distinction that belongs only to the dialectical development, and one unknown to metaphysical philosophizing, to which the critical also belongs. The definition of metaphysics, like its presuppositions, distinctions, and conclusions, are meant to assert and produce only the existent, and that too as existent in itself. In the unity of the something with itself, being for other is identical with its in itself. The being for other is thus in the something. The determinateness thus reflected into itself is therefore again a simple existent, and hence again a quality, determination. B. Determination, constitution, and limit. Let's check that footnote real quick. Bestimmung also carries the meaning of vocation or destiny. The in itself, in which the something is reflected into itself from its being for other, no longer is an abstract in itself, but as a negation of its being for other, is mediated through this latter, which is thus its moment. It is not only the immediate identity of the something with itself, but the identity by virtue of which the something also has present in it what it is in itself. The being for other is present in it, because the in itself is the sublation of it, is in itself from it, but because it is still abstract and therefore essentially affected with negation, it is equally affected with being for other. We have here not only quality and reality, existent determinateness, but determinateness existent in itself, and the development consisting in positing such determinateness as thus eminently reflected. 1. The quality which in the simple something is, and in itself, essentially in unity with the something's other movement, its being in it, can be named its determination, provided that this word is distinguished in a more precise signification from determinateness in general. Determination is affirmative determinateness. It is the in itself by which something abides in its existence when involved with another that would determine it, by which it preserves itself in its self-equality, holding on to it in its being for other. So the determination for a lighter is to light fires, right? That is what it has been determined in general for. It changes when it's empty, but while it is being in itself, it is also being for me a lighter. Something fulfills its determination to the extent that the further determinateness, which variously accrues to it, the measure of its being in itself as it relates to another, becomes its filling. Determination implies that what something is in itself is also present in it. The determination of the human being, its vocation, is rational thought. Thinking in general is his simple determinateness. By it, the human being is distinguished from the brute. He is thinking in himself, insofar as this thinking is distinguished also from his being for other, from his own natural and sensuous being. It brings him in immediate association with the other. But thinking is also in him. The human being is himself thinking. He exists as thinking. Thought is his concrete existence and actuality. And further, since thinking is in his existence and his existence is in his thinking, thinking is concrete, must be taken as having content and filling. It is rational thought, and as such, the determination of the human being. But even this determination is again only in itself as an ought. That is to say, it is, together with the filling embodied in it's in itself, in the form of an in itself in general, as against the existence which is not embodied in it but still lies outside, confronting it, immediate sensibility and nature. 2. The filling of the being in itself with determinateness is also distinct from the determinateness which is only being for other and remains outside the determination. For in the sphere of the qualitative, the distinguished terms are left in their sublated being, also with an immediate qualitative being contrasting them. That which the something has in it thus separates itself and is, from this side, the external existence of something, and also its existence, but not as belonging to its being in itself. Determinateness is thus constitution. Constituted in this or that way, the something is caught up in external influences and in external relationships. This external connection on which the constitution depends, and the being determined through another, appear as something accidental, but it is the quality of the something to be given over to this externality and to have a constitution. In so far as something alters, the alteration falls on the side of its constitution. The latter is that in the something, which becomes another, the something itself preserves itself in the alteration. The latter affects only this unstable surface of the something's otherness, not its determination. Determination and constitution are thus distinct from each other. Something, according to its determination, is indifferent to its constitution. But that which the something has in it is the middle term of this syllogism connecting the two, determination and constitution. Or, rather, the being in the something showed itself to fall apart into these two extremes. The simple middle term is determinateness as such. Its identity belongs to determination just as well as to constitution. But determination passes over into constitution on its own, and constitution into determination. This is implied in what has been said. The connection, upon closer consideration, is this. In so far as that which something is in itself is also in it, the something is affected with being for other. Determination is therefore open, as such, to the relation with other. Determinateness is at the same time moment, but it contains at the same time the qualitative distinction of being different from being in itself, of being the negative of the something, another existence. This determinateness, which thus holds the other in itself, united with the being in itself, introduces otherness in the latter or indetermination, and determination is thereby reduced to constitution. Conversely, the being for other, isolated as constitution, is posited on its own. It is in it the same as what the other as such is. The other in it, that is, the other of itself, but it consequently is self-referring existence. Thus, being in itself with a determinateness, therefore determination. Consequently, inasmuch as the two are also to be held apart, constitution, which appears to be grounded in something external, in another in general, also depends on determination, and the determining from outside is, at the same time, determined by the something's own immanent determination. And further, constitution belongs to that which something is in itself. Something alters along with its constitution. The altering of something is no longer the first alteration of something merely in accordance with its being for other. The first was an alteration only implicitly present, one that belonged to the inner concept. Now the alteration is also posited in the something. The something itself is further determined, and negation is posited as immanent to it, as its developed being in itself. The transition of determination and constitution into each other is at first the sublation of their distinction, the existence or something in general, and thereby posited. Moreover, since this something in general results from a distinction that also includes qualitative otherness within it, there are two somethings. But these are, with respect to each other, not just others in general, so that this negation would still be abstract and would occur only in the comparison of the two. Rather, the negation now is immanent to the somethings. As existing, they are indifferent to each other, but this, their affirmation, is no longer immediate. Each refers itself to itself through the intermediary of the sublation of the otherness, which in determination is reflected into the in itselfedness. Something behaves in this way in relation to the other through itself, since otherness is posited in it as its own moment. Its in itselfness holds negation in itself, and it now has affirmative existence through its intermediary alone. But the other is also qualitatively distinguished from this affirmative existence, and is thus posited outside the something. The negation of the other is only the quality of the something, for it is in this sublation of its other that it is something. The other, for its part, truly confronts an existence only with the sublation. It confronts the first something only externally, or, since the two are in fact inherently joined together, that is, according to their concept, their connectedness consists in this, that existence has passed over into otherness, something into other. That something is just as much another as the other is. Now, insofar as the in itselfness is the non-being of the otherness that it contained in it, but is at the same time also distinct as existent, something is itself negation, the ceasing to be of another in it. It is posited as behaving negatively in relation to the other, and in doing so, preserving itself. This other, the in itselfness of the something as negation to the negation, is the something's being in itself. This sublation is a simple negation at the same time in it, namely, as its negation of the other something external to it. It is one determinateness of two somethings that, on the one hand, as negation of the negation is identical with the in itselfness of the somethings. And also, on the other hand, since these negations are to each other as other somethings, joins them together of their own accord, and since each negation negates the other, equally separates them. This determinateness is limit. So, once you have the characteristics which will define this particular lighter, the changes that take place, right, as you narrow down the scope, right, you go lighter, and then you say 3-inch long lighter. That narrows it down from a 4-inch long lighter or a 2-inch long lighter. And so the 4-inch long lighter becomes something other, while this holds for itself 3 inches. Once you say green, right, it separates itself from the options of the others. Those things together create what constitutes this particular lighter, if not all lighters in general. And so then changing the quality, which has been the defining characteristic, changes what it is. So when the butane is gone, it no longer lights fires. It's a nice piece of plastic, but it is no longer a lighter. That's the limit, right? It is a lighter only as long as it acts as a lighter does. Then it becomes something which is defined by different characteristics, some of which are the same and some of which are different. 3. Being for other is indeterminate, affirmative association of something with its other. In limit, the non-being for other is emphasized, the qualitative negation of the other, which is thereby kept out of the something that is reflected into itself. We must see the development of this concept, a development that will rather look like confusion and contradiction. Contradiction immediately raises its head because limit, as an internally reflected negation of something, ideally holds in it the moments of something and other, and these, as distinct moments, are at the same time posited in the sphere of existence as really qualitatively distinct. So, this holds both at the same time, lighter and trash, right? Up until the point where it becomes trash, it is lighter, but right now, it is the potential for trash. So it holds both qualities, but they are really qualitatively distinct. Why is Pisces in here? Something is therefore immediate, self-referring existence, and at first it has a limit with respect to another. Limit is the non-being of the other, not of the something itself. So the limit is green, right? That doesn't mean that there is not a being of blue, but this one is green. It has a limit. The limit is green. Something marks the boundary of its other, but other is itself a something in general. The limit that something has with respect to another is, therefore, also the limit of the other as a something. It is the limit of this something, in virtue of which the something holds the first something as its other away from itself, or is a non-being of that something. The limit is thus not only the non-being of the other, but of the one something just as of the other, and consequently of the something in general. But the limit is equally, essentially, the non-being of the other. Thus, through its limit, something at the same time is. In limiting, something is, of course, thereby reduced to being limited itself, but as the ceasing of the other in it, its limit is at the same time itself only the being of the something. This something is what it is by virtue of it, has its quality in it. This relation is the external appearance of the fact that limit is simple negation, or the first negation, whereas the other is, at the same time, the negation of the negation, the in-itselfness of the something. Something, as an immediate existence, is therefore the limit with respect to another something, but it has this limit in it, and is something through the mediation of that limit, which is just as much its non-being. The limit is the mediation in virtue of which something and other, each, both is and is not. Beta. Now, insofar as something and its limit both is and is not, and these moments are an immediate qualitative distinction, the non-existence and the existence of something fall outside each other. Something has its existence outside its limit, or, as representation would also have it, inside it. In the same way, the other, too, since it is something, has it outside it. The limit is the middle point between the two at which they leave off. They have existence beyond each other, beyond their limit. The limit, as the non-being of each, is the other of both. So that would be blue and green, right? And the middle point being undesignated, right? The middle where they leave off and they differentiate from each other is the assignment of color. In the particular instance of color. Now, if they were both green lighters, but one was 3 inches and one was 4 inches, that would be the limit by which they are differentiated. It is in accordance with this difference of the something from its limit that the line appears as line outside its limit, the point, the plane as plane outside the line, the solid as solid only outside its limiting plane. This is the aspect of limit that first occurs in figurative representation, the self-eternal being of the concept. It is also most commonly assumed in the context of spatial objects. I don't know what this symbol is. It's probably kappa, I think, but I don't know. But further, something as it is outside the limit, as the unlimited something, is only existence in general. That is, before it is defined, right? As such, it is not distinguished from its other. It is only existence, and therefore it and its other have the same determination. Each is only something in general, or each is other, and both are the same. But this, there, at first immediate existence, is now posited in them as limit. In it, both are what they are, distinct from each other. But it is also equally their common distinguishedness, the unity and the distinguishedness of both, just like existence. This double identity of the two, existence and limit, contain this, that something has existence only in limit, and that, since limit and immediate existence are each at the same time the negative of each other, the something, which is now only in its limit, equally separates from itself, points it beyond itself to its non-being, and declares it to be its being, and so it passes over into it. To apply this to the preceding example, the one determination is this, that something is what it is only in its limit. Therefore, the point is the limit of the line, not because the latter just ceases at the point and has existence outside it. The line is the limit of the plane, not because the plane just ceases at it, and at the same time for the plane as the limit of a solid. Rather, at the point the line also begins. The point is its absolute beginning, and if the line is represented as unlimited on both its two sides, or, as it is said, as extended to infinity, the point still constitutes its element, just as the line constitutes the element of the plane, and the plane that of the solid. These limits are the principle of that which they delimit, just as one, for instance, is as hundredth the limit, but also the element of the whole hundred. The other determination is the unrest of the something in its limit in which it is immanent, the contradiction that propels it beyond itself. Thus, the point is this dialectic of itself becoming line, the line, the dialectic of becoming plane, the plane of becoming total space. A second definition is given of line, plane, and whole space, which has the line come to be through the movement of the point, the plane through the movement of the line, and so forth. This movement of the point, the line, and so forth, is however viewed as something accidental or as movement only in figurative representation. In fact, however, this view is taken back by supposing that the determinations from which the line and so forth originate are their elements and principles, and these are, at the same time, nothing else but their limits. The coming to be is not considered as accidental or only as represented. That the point, the line, the plane are, per se, self-contradictory beginnings which, on their own, repel themselves from themselves, and, consequently, that the point passes over from itself into the line through its concept, moves in itself, and makes the line come to be, and so on. All this lies in the concept of the limit which is immanent in the something. The application itself, however, belongs to the treatment of space. As an indication of it here, we can say that the point is the totally abstract limit. But in a determinate existence, this existence is still taken in total abstraction. It is the so-called absolute, that is, abstract space, the absolutely continuous being outside one another. Inasmuch as the limit is not abstract negation, but is rather in this existence, inasmuch as it is spatial determinateness, the point is spatial, is the contradiction of abstract negation and continuity, and is, for that reason, the transition as it occurs, and has already occurred into the line, and so forth. And so, there is no point, just as there is no line or plane. The something, posited with its immanent limit as the contradiction of itself by virtue which it is directed and driven out and beyond itself, is the finite. C. Finitude. Existence is determinate. Something has a quality, and in this quality it is not only determined but delimited. Its quality is its limit and affected by it. Something remains affirmative, quiescent existence, but so developed that the opposition of its existence and the negation as the limit immanent to the existence is the very in itselfness of the something, and this is thus only becoming in it. This negation constitutes the finitude of the something. When we say of things that they are finite, we understand by this that they not only have a determinateness, that their quality is not only reality and existent determination, but that they are not merely limited and, as such, still have existence outside their limit, but rather that non-being constitutes their nature, their being. Finite things are, but in their reference to themselves, they refer to themselves negatively. In this very self-reference, they propel themselves, beyond their being. They are, But the truth of this being is, as in Latin, their finis, their end. The finite does not just alter as the possibility in general does, but perishes. And its perishing is not just a mere possibility, as if it might be without perishing. Rather, the being of such finite things is to have the germ of this transgression in their in-itselfness. The hour of their birth is the hour of their death. Alpha, the immediacy of finitude. The thought of the finitude of things brings this mournful note with it, because finitude is qualitative negation driven to the extreme, and in the simplicity of such determination, there is no longer left to things an affirmative, being distinct from their determination, as things destined to ruin. Because of this qualitative simplicity of negation that has returned to the abstract opposition of nothing and perishing to being, finitude is the most obstinate of the categories of the understanding. Negation, in general, constitution, limit, are compatible with their other, with existence. Even the abstract nothing by itself is given up as an abstraction. But finitude is negation fixed in itself, and, as such, stands in stark contrast to its affirmative. The finite, thus, does indeed let itself be submitted to flux. This is precisely what it is, that it should come to an end, and this end is its only determination. Its refusal is, rather, to let itself be brought affirmatively to its affirmative, the infinite, to be associated with it. It is thereby, therefore, inseparably posited with its nothing, and thereby cut off from any reconciliation with its other, the affirmative. The determination of finite things does not go past their end. The understanding persists in this sorrow of finitude, for it makes non-being the determination of things, and, at the same time, this non-being imperishable and absolute. Their transitoriness would only pass away in their other, in the affirmative. Their finitude would then be severed from them. But this finitude is their unalterable quality, that is, their quality which does not pass over into their other, that is, not into the affirmative. So, finitude is eternal. This is an important consideration, but that the finitude is absolute is certainly not a standpoint that any philosophy or outlook, or the understanding, would want to endorse. The opposite is rather expressly present in the assertion of finitude. The finite is the restricted, the perishable. The finite is only the finite, not the imperishable. All this is immediately part and parcel of his determination and expression. But all depend on whether, in one's view of finitude, its being is insisted on, and the transitoriness thus persists, or whether the transitoriness and the perishing perish. The fact is that this perishing of the perishing does not happen on precisely the view that would make the perishing the final end of the finite. The official claim is that the finite is incompatible with the infinite and cannot be united with it. That the finite is absolutely opposed to the infinite. Being, absolute being, is ascribed to the infinite. The finite remains held fast over against it as its negative, incapable of union with the infinite. It remains absolute on its own side. From the affirmative, from the infinite, it would receive affirmation, and thus it would perish. But a union with the infinite is precisely what is declared impossible. If the infinite were not to persist over against the infinite, but were to perish, if the finite were not to persist over against the infinite, but were to perish, its perishing, as just said, would then be the last of it. not its affirmative, which would be only a perishing of the perishing. However, if it is not to perish in the affirmative, but its end is rather to be grasped as a nothing, then we are back at that first abstract nothing that itself has long since passed away. With this nothing, however, which is supposed to be the only nothing, but to which a reflective existence is nevertheless granted in thought, in representation, or in speech. The same contradiction occurs as we have just indicated in connection with the finite, except that in the nothing it just occurs, but in the finite it is instead expressed. In the one case, the contradiction appears as subjective. In the other, the finite is said to stand in perpetual opposition to the infinite, in itself to be null, and to be as null in itself. This is now to be brought to consciousness. The development of the finite will show that, expressly as this contradiction, it collapses internally, but that, in this collapse, it actually resolves the contradiction. It will show that the finite is not just perishable, and that it perishes, but that the perishing, the nothing, is rather not the last of it, that the perishing rather perishes. That's a little bit harder of a one to distinguish, right? But basically, right, to go back to the lighter, this contains the possibility of not being a lighter. And at the point where it becomes not the lighter, it returns to the infinite. It is a possibility of unusability that will not be changed, right? This is not a refillable lighter. And so the finite, clearly defined determinateness then becomes something other. The infinite, non-usable lighter, right? There is no return to the finite definition of lighter once the butane is out of this particular lighter. Now, I have a torch around here somewhere, and it's refillable, right? And so when it's empty, it has the possibility to become a lighter again, whereas this one doesn't. This passes from the finite, this is a lighter, into the infinite, non-useful entity. All right, I'm going to check this real quick and see how long this is, because we're going to have to go ahead and wrap this one up here. We are already 20 pages in, right? Page 103 makes right at 20 pages. My voice is starting to give out, and if this section was shorter, we would finish this, but we will be picking back up tomorrow with restriction and the ought, but that will bring us to the end of this particular section today. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a very complicated topic. The distinction between what is and what could be is important, right? The understanding that while this could be, it is not now. That's important. The this is but could not be is also an important distinction. And the fact that once the lighter runs out of butane, it is no longer a lighter, is a defining characteristic. And this is about defining the characteristic. So hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a sub. Throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was stated, put it in the comments. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see discussed, drop that in the comments as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks or even a membership. It will be greatly appreciated. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.